questionnaire serve for more than just percentages. And here there will be a couple of misunderstandings that I would really like to address and lift at some point. Most students, when you see most students do their questionnaires by just producing nice graphs with percentages, saying X% of people react like this, X% of people do that. And then you see a long procession of diagrams, generally, or charts, generally, more or less one per question asked. And the more questions you have, the more diagrams you have. But honestly, those percentages are not statistics. Students tend to believe that percentages are statistics, are analysis. And if you remember last week I said I do not know what analysis means. So most students do believe that percentages are statistics and are proper, strong analysis. Most students do believe that a nice chart is a nice visual for analysis. They're wrong. Percentage is not stats. A percentage is not an analysis. A percentage is a description of things we could have known without this study. So there is little, if not none, there's little value added with just percentages proceeding from a questionnaire. So the real value of a questionnaire is to arrive at ideal typical profiles of respondents. And this means that we should be able to reveal things that are not naturally visible. That's that's the thing. And what I always do is that I always give an example, and then students start understanding what it means. Their example is here. When you check in a hotel, you might have noticed that most of the times you're asked what you're having for breakfast. Are you having tea or coffee for breakfast? You do not really think about it. You mechanically say, oh, I'm having tea, or I'm having coffee, or I'm not having breakfast, or whatsoever. And then you forget. And at times, this was the case for me, you wonder, but why are they asking me about this? Why does it matter? And it does matter, as actually all this proceeds from a survey, a questionnaire that has been addressed to thousands of hotel guests on their breakfast habits. And the results showed profiles of respondents. And those profiles were not demographics based. Those profiles were not males like this, females like that. No. It was much more trivial and much more useful for hotel management. Saying guests having coffee in the morning tend to have a savory breakfast with ham, cheese, eggs. Those guests drinking tea for breakfast tend to have a sweet breakfast with Weetabix, with cereals, with fruits, with viennoiseries, so croissant, pain au chocolat, and stuff. So when you're asked this question at the check-in, it is because hotel management needs to know how much food they need to order for breakfast in the morning so as to avoid waste. So here we've got, with the question, are you having tea or coffee for breakfast? A poll helping define profiles of respondents, so we can order the right amount of food without too much waste. Interesting, isn't it? And this is something you would not just have identified by giving us percentages. Oh, X% of people say they want tea, X% of people say they want coffee, X% of people are having croissants, X% of people are having eggs. With this, you can't do anything. You can't. You just can't. So, we will see this more in depth very soon. What is interesting here with a questionnaire? You are supposed to establish correlations between variables. This is what is important. You identify a number of variables that are important, and then you see how they're correlated and to what extent those correlations lead to profiles. And here correlations would be between responses to the tea or coffee question, but also responses to the other breakfast habit questions. And at the end of the day, we see. And I would like to share with you something a student of mine did wonderfully in his doctoral thesis about 10 years ago. I'm just retrieving the page I want to show you. Here it is. So you will hopefully understand what I mean. So for me, this figure is so good that I have used it in my research methods book. So the one you see here on the right, which was published in November 2017 in French. For some reason, no English-speaking publisher thought it would be useful. But I'll try again because I think now it might be. So what does this figure say? This figure says that we've got here questions that are from M1 to M19. And here my student identified correlations between questions 2 by 2. All possible correlations here were identified. Then he only retained the ones that were statistically relevant, statistically significant. And this means there were only here about 20 or 20 plus relationships that were relevant. And then he had a mediating variable here, and it checks the correlation between the mediating variable and the behavior of those correlations here, which leads to then a second treatment where the correlation between the mediating variable and the behavior of the correlations lead to a new set of correlations, which were here with JS. JS does not mean Jason. So we have then retained the ones that are statistically significant. Here, S1 from S1 to S10, and we've got coefficients here. And then we've got all those correlations with their coefficients in a table. And I do not have the table here, but in a table, and this is and then we see the coefficients. But what I think is interesting here is that we see how, starting from about 20, or here we've got 29, 30 questions or variables, we narrow down to the statistically significant correlations. Then we do the same with another set of correlations, and at the end of the day arrive at a smaller and more manageable scope of correlations that then enabled us to define profiles of respondents. This is where it can be very strong to do questionnaires when you want to arrive at those profiles of respondents. If you just describe, if you just provide percentages, it is useless, honestly, nearly irrelevant. This then takes me to, after this relatively long introduction, this takes me to the illusion of percentages as being insightful. Yeah, that's true. Percentages can give some insights, but the problem is that very often the number we have does not tell us much, and this is something I want to discuss with you from now, showing more figures. Oops, sorry. Here it is. Tracking the presidency, something coming from The Economist. 461 days into Donald Trump's term. And here we will see some polls and percentages, and we will try to discuss their usefulness, their pertinence, and what we can do with this. And it was from today, right? So if you say last updated today. And after this, I will show you something which I think is much more powerful, coming from Britain and updated 2 or 3 days ago. So here we see the president's net approval rating is -17, up 0.5 points since last week. 38% approve, 56% disapprove, 7% not sure. Based on this, honestly, I do not really know to what extent we have reliable data and what to learn from it, really. So here, first question, what is the worth or the reliability of the sample of respondents? Who were the respondents? Do we have 30% of respondents approving, or do we really have 38% of the US population approving? I'm not sure. Same for those who disapprove, same for those who are not sure. I do not know. But also, I would like to know who are those who approve, and has there been any change since last week amongst this population? We see that its net approval rating is -17, so it has okay. But who are his supporters? Who are his opponents? We do not know here, and this is what is important. This is what we really need to understand. And let's see further here. Here we can see, interesting, by state, by demographic, and by most important issues, which means that there will be some complements to this. Just for your information, I read this article today and really loved it, and that's why I'm not entirely discovering it, right? So here, by state, what is interesting? Let's see. So the states that really approve are those in grey and so to black. The ones that disapprove are going from pink to dark red. So far, so good. Okay, let's see who disapproves. So in what states? California, Colorado, no big surprise. So no big surprise. Both are Democrat states, certainly not Republicans, although California voted for Arnold Schwarzenegger as their governor about 30 years ago. He was a Republican, but a leftist Republican. Washington and Oregon, very social states, owing to a large extent to their proximity to Canada. So not a big surprise that Donald Trump is not popular and lost part of his popularity. Minnesota, Illinois, Wisconsin, not a big surprise either. Okay, I'm not taking all of them, of course, but just to say, here we see that states where Donald Trump is not popular initially, states that are Democrat, would obviously not support him more now. And Vermont, where Bernie Sanders is elected, is probably one of the most disappointed or the strongest opponents to Donald Trump. Those states that are still happy with Donald Trump are Idaho, Wyoming, Utah, Arizona, Tennessee, Oklahoma, Alabama. Well, in a nutshell, I would say bogan states. I'm sorry, I'm speaking Australian English when I'm speaking of the US. Let's say rednecks. I think you would say rednecks. Redneck states are those that do not approve those that approve Donald Trump. Okay, is this telling us much? Not that much, honestly, as we have a sort of a confirmation of something we already know with those figures. What is interesting, however, is that very few states approve Donald Trump. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 states out of 50 approve Donald Trump, which means 40 out of 50 disapprove Donald Trump. Here is probably something more interesting. So let's then continue so as to know if we can have more figures that would tell us more about the profiles of people approving or disapproving Donald Trump. So here between males and females, is there anything interesting? Males are those who disapprove Donald Trump the least. Females disapprove him more, which is not a big surprise. So when you remember Donald Trump's claims and utterances during his first campaign and first term, very misogynic. Of course, females are not really his greatest support, but his popularity or approval amongst females has dramatically dropped. Okay, not a big surprise, but interesting to see that there is a sort of a gap between males and females. Then you've got age. Age. Here, those who are between 45 and above 65 are the ones who disapprove Donald Trump the least, whilst anyone under 44 disapproves Donald Trump the more. Here, is it a real surprise? Possibly. Possibly. I would say that the elderly are probably more legitimistic than younger people, so they would probably approve the president in office, whoever he is, even if you have a Republican. I'm pretty sure that they would sort of approve Joe Biden, a Democrat, and vice versa. So I'm not too surprised. But also, with 45 to 64, it's probably people who are employed and people who are making money and not suffering too much from anything. And others may be more suffering. But here we need to cross this information with something else, as it is difficult to really make sense of it as such. So let's go with race. Here, the ones who disapprove him the least are white people. Here I'm not surprised at all, insofar as Donald Trump has always flattered his white base. So it is no surprise. And black people are really the ones who disapprove him the most. But probably already approving him very little, and the ones who sort of approved him at the beginning might indeed have been delusioned. Who might those be? This is what we need to know. So, okay, so there has been a drop in 80% amongst the black community. But who in the black community could have well been supportive of Donald Trump? I would probably say evangelists. Black evangelists, as Donald Trump has always flattered their evangelists. But here, I do not know. So this data would probably need to be triangulated with something else, so the number here, the figure, makes more sense. And then, education. Okay, education, high school or less. Those are the people who disapproved of Trump the least, whilst people with postgrad level are those who disapprove him the most. I'm not really surprised here at this result, honestly. I'm not surprised, as Donald Trump has always been addressing male people who are white-skinned and who do not have much of an education. So the real, the Australian word is coming to me, bogan, the real redneck base. So he's kept flattering them as much as he could, and has still lost in popularity amongst them, but less than with people having a post-grad education. Those people who are probably not too happy with his populist approach, with his recurrent changes in mind, with his unpredictability, so that those people can hardly project themselves and envision a foreseeable future. So this is what I feel, but here still to be enriched with other data. Otherwise, we could only extrapolate or not make a lot of sense of this. Let's continue here with what is the most important issue facing America. And here, interesting, we've got responses by party. And this is where I think it's interesting. So we've got first, inflation and prices. Democrats, Republicans, and entitled. So interestingly here, now in 2026, inflation and prices is equally important for Republicans, Democrats, and others, and the entire population. Interesting. Jobs and their economy itself, we see where we're at now, 2026, same. So it is a concern. So 14% for Democrats, 14% for Republicans, and 13% for others. Okay. Healthcare as the third one. Democrats really care about it much more than Republicans. In 2026, it is 14% for the Democrats, 11% for the Republicans, and 8% for all. Okay. Immigration. Interestingly and unsurprisingly, really, immigration mattered very much for Republicans, so for 29%, at a peak when Donald Trump was campaigning, so 2023, 2024. Now it is much less of an issue because the concern is more with the war in Iran. 17%, 9% only. 3% only for the Democrats. They do not really care about immigration, etc. So I will not paraphrase everything, but here, what I wanted to show you with this diagram, with those figures coming from a poll, like a survey, a questionnaire, we've got numbers of which we cannot make much sense. We need to go more in depth so as to identify potential profiles of respondents. And here we have some intuitions. And here this is more intuitions that need to be triangulated so as to arrive at something that really makes sense. And this is where I want to show you something else I have found, which is very interesting. This is in the UK. UK in a Changing Europe. It's a think tank that is supporting the EU in the UK, or that was opposing Brexit. And here they do an MRP poll, and this is where it's very interesting. This is where we are close to our concerns for tonight, where we do polls and questionnaires to arrive at typical profiles of respondents. So here, MRP stands for multi-level regression and post-stratification. It is a statistical modeling technique whereby pollsters combine a very large poll with other sources of information, such as census data, in order to estimate, for example, the local levels of support for parties in every constituency. This means that here we do not just rely on responses to the questions asked, but we cross those responses with other publicly available information, with other official information, official data. The very large poll sample is used to generate estimates of the vote preferences of many different small groups of people. For instance, graduate women under 30 who rent their homes, or 50-something, small businesses owning men who own 2 cars in very small areas like constituencies or electoral wards. The census and other data sources provide estimates of how many voters from each small group live in each seat. The model then combines their estimates of how each group votes with their estimates of how many live in each seat to project their election result in each seat. Here, what does it mean? It means that this approach tries to divide the population into small groups, small units that are representative of a fraction of the population, of the whole population, so that they can see at the closest level, the smallest level in their polls, how people behave. And by crossing this, by multiplying this many times with many people for each group, etc., by crossing this with other sources of data, they will arrive, and I will show you soon, they should arrive at some typical profiles of respondents. And for me, it's really revolutionary, I think, really. So MRP is a valuable resource in a system like Britain's, where each general election is in fact hundreds of local contests taking place simultaneously. Multi-level regression and post-stratification provides a way to model the many variations between one local context and the next, something which isn't really possible with traditional polling, and I do agree. However, any MRP model involves a lot of assumptions and estimates, and different models can produce different results with the same starting data. That's interesting, and that's where I think it might be very powerful, and I'll get back to this. And as with all polling, MRP models can only tell us about the state of opinion when the polling data is collected. The voters can, and often do, change their minds as the campaign progresses. So here, what I think is very strong is that we have a model which is multi-level, which combines empirical observations with responses to the poll, with public data, with different sources of data that has been checked, plus what is interesting, and they present it as a warning or a weakness, but I think it can be a strength. The model involves a lot of assumptions and estimates. And this is where it's very strong. This means that the analysts have to know the context very well already, so that they are in a capacity of articulating assumptions and making them explicit and justifying those assumptions. And they can then indeed have a sort of an intuition of what they can find, and so that two different people could have different assumptions and perhaps arrive at two different conclusions. But here they make it very clear, and what they're saying here is we're making assumptions, we are articulating, we're devising research hypotheses, and we are testing those hypotheses. But as we are making our own hypothesis, someone with a different hypothesis would probably arrive at a slightly different result, which for me is not a problem, provided the assumptions and estimates and the different models are made clear to everybody. So here, April 2026, so it was posted on the 23rd. Here, what I would like to see is the result of the polls, and then we will see more data. So the headlines, they say that the poll places Reform UK 24% ahead of the Conservatives with 21%, and the Labour third place with 17%. 𝗬𝗢𝗨𝗥, how closely does their methodology resemble or align with that of meta studies? Where it's not a meta study is that a meta study combines the data coming from previous studies and processes this data. Whilst here, this other data comes not to be processed, but to supplement the data they have collected. So the other data comes to inform on the results you have here. Whilst the meta-analysis is an analysis where you take the data used by others and you treat the data treated by others. You redo their study plus the same study conducted by others. And this is where we have a big difference. Does this make sense to you? Or I hope it does, at least. So here, let's say, what is interesting? Reform on these figures. Reform is predicted to secure 188 seats, where the majority is 138. The Conservatives, and they're too short by 138 too short for the majority. The Conservatives should have 159 and Labour 86 and the Green Party 71. Okay. Here, if we take interestingly, so we've got the general election from 2024, so the votes and the seats. Here we've got the votes and the seats as per the MRP analysis. So far, so good. I would say it is more or less a traditional, it looks like a traditional poll. Okay, but now probably more interesting. You then see seat by seat, not just region by region, but seat by seat. You see where they're at, what the poll says. So here you've got the predicted winners by seat, and you can see where the Labour is bound to remain strong. Northeastern England, southwest of England, around London, okay, Middlesex here. Then the yellow would be, Plaid and SNP, of course. SNP in Scotland, and Plaid is in Wales, so it's not a big surprise. Okay, so here seat by seat, and we can cross this with the sociology of each region. So Reform UK is blue, is light blue, and Reform UK is strong around here, around Liverpool, around Sheffield, and in those areas where you had factories and where you had industries that lived. So the unemployed working class, and Reform UK is strong in those parts of the UK. And here we could cross this with more data, which they have done, and they claimed it. But interesting. Then tactical voting. Following a major polling project on tactical voting, and I think that's very interesting, by electoral calculus, and find out now, we are able to estimate the effect of tactical voting on the predicted election result. Our TV analysis, so tactical voting analysis, shows that strong anti-reform tactical voting could cost Reform UK dozens of seats. Over a third of Labour voters say they would vote Conservative to keep reform out. Otherwise, voters on the left and right respectively support other candidates on the same side. So here, what is interesting is that we understand the possible results with this tactical voting, with the fact that we do not want Reform UK. We know that Reform UK is the first party in the UK, in Britain, but both a number of Conservatives and a number of Labour voters would vote against their party, naturally, so as to support the party that has chances to win against Reform UK. And this is something that this study has tried to measure so as to arrive at something more realistic, I think. And here you see, without tactical voting, 73 seats for Reform UK, and with tactical voting, they're bound to have 188 only. I think it's very interesting. With the same number of votes, though, nationwide. So here, let's say, they're taking into consideration a dimension which is very, very strong in voting. When you vote, you do not just vote for someone, you also vote in the hope that someone you really do not want in would not be voted in. And they take this into consideration. And here we start having an interesting interpretation of this score that we see here. If we just take this, we think, why not? But then we see count seat by seat, then we see with tactical voting, but then who runs your council? With local elections coming up on the 7th of May, we wanted to see how much people were aware of politics in their local area. We asked them, as far as you know, which political party currently leads your local council or local authority. Nearly a third of voters admitted that they don't know which party currently leads their local council. Of those who gave an answer, 46% correctly identified the leading party, while 24% were wrong, which means that political awareness is a dimension introduced to feed this tactical voting, to fine-tune this tactical voting and to fine-tune this result that would just come from a traditional poll. Then how they treated they don't knows, and that's very important here as well. Following polling errors in 2024, electoral calculus took part in investigations into possible causes. That's important, into possible causes, which traditional polling does not do. So coordinated by the British Polling Council, our findings are available here. In summary, centre-left voters were more likely to overestimate their likelihood to turn out. Those who did not know or refused to ransom might have voted according to their general election 2019 preference. To incorporate these findings into our post-election polling, we have made two assumptions about those who answer don't know to either the turnout or voting intention questions. Those who say don't know to the turnout question are assumed to be unlikely to vote. Those who say don't know to the voting intention question are assumed to vote in the same way as for the 2024 general election. Okay, I will not detail everything, but what I wanted to show you with this, on one hand, the Economist and their polls about approval or disapproval of Donald Trump, and on the other hand, this MRP approach in the UK for the electoral calculus was what happens when you just take raw data, raw percentages, and try to draw conclusions where at best you just describe, at best you just describe, and it's not very interesting, describe things we already know that do not deserve such a study. At worst, you extrapolate and you over-interpret, so you do not know, and you try to fill those gaps in your percentages by providing external or things or information which you do not have at all. And here the MRP approach does the opposite. The MRP approach seeks to draw typical profiles of voters. And that's what I think makes this approach very strong, really. So this is what I wanted to show you for today. So just a few things to retain before I let you go. First, a percentages is nearly never a scientific result. A percentage is nearly impossible to exploit. A percentage needs interpretation with extra data. A questionnaire serves to identify typical profiles of respondents. A questionnaire is not here to give you percentages. X% of people said this, X% of people said that. No, you must distinguish those coffee drinkers, tea drinkers, and breakfast habits. So, the very question with a survey, a poll, a questionnaire is not how many people think this, but who thinks that. And it's not easy to arrive at who thinks that. So I think you enjoyed. I think it was helpful. As usual, I enjoyed myself. So thank you very much for making it tonight. Next week I will discuss what does your dataset really allow. What can we draw what lessons can we learn from data. And this will be an extension of today, of course. So you're welcome. I'm happy to have seen you here tonight, both 𝗤𝗤𝗘𝗦𝗙, Shuhei, and if anyone else wants to say who they are, I'm more than happy to interject. So thank you very much to everybody, and I wish you a lovely week ahead, and I'm looking forward to seeing you next Sunday. And by the way, as next Monday is Labour, I will send the message, the WhatsApp message, on the Thursday. I do not want to bother people, to bother colleagues or friends on Labour Day. So you will receive the message on the Thursday. Thank you very much, and see you next week. Bye-bye.